Hi, I'm going to show you how to make this silk ribbon embroidered honeysuckle flower, buds and berries. So I've got some 7mm pure silk white embroidery ribbon from craftyattic.com. I'm just running it through a set of mini straighteners to flatten it out and make it nice and glossy. I've tied a knot in one end and I'm just now beginning to work on the honeysuckle flower. So I'm twisting the ribbon and I'm just going to twist it up maybe about an inch, something like that, worth of ribbon, stick a pin in, and I'm just using a regular white machine thread just to couch this down up until about an inch away from where it came up through. I've tied a knot in the end of this ribbon because this is going to be in a quilted thing. You won't be able to fill the knot when it's finished. If you were going to, say, mount it on a piece of board, then you might want to just not fasten it off with a knot, just fasten it off with some regular stitches. So now I've done that, I'm going to open the end back out again and I'm going to do a twisted ribbon stitch. So I'm twisting the ribbon slightly, I'm passing the ribbon back down through the centre of itself, allowing the ends to curl neatly, and then just turning the stitch over. So it's the end of it is disappearing into the fabric in a nice neat way. So once again, bringing the ribbon up through the fabric, twisting up to about an inch, anchoring with a little pin, and then couching using the same couching thread that I used before. So we're actually working on a piece of crazy patchwork I've done here, a crazy patchwork hexagon. You can view the video on my website or on my YouTube channel of how to do the crazy patchwork hexagon. So I'm just couching this down now. I don't know what this stitch is called because I've never seen anybody else do it, so I'm going to call it a honeysuckle stitch, and if I invented it, yay! If I didn't and I'm calling it the wrong thing, terribly sorry. But this is what I'm going to call it. So I've couched up to about an inch, I'm twisting the ribbon, and then I'm going to pass the ribbon back down through the centre of itself. I'm going to leave a little puff in this one, so leave it raised up off of the fabric slightly. Pull it down, allowing the ends to curl into a point, and then just flipping the stitch over so that it's disappearing neatly into the fabric. So I'm just going to continue doing these honeysuckle stitches now in exactly the same way. So you must always use, when you're doing silk ribbon embroidery, you have to use 100% pure silk embroidery ribbon. If you don't, you won't be able to pull it through the fabric and it won't move and be as fluid for you. You'll find it almost impossible to create any decent results with anything but 100% silk. We ship out from Crafty Attic worldwide with free postage, so if you want something and you live in New Zealand or the States, don't panic, we'll send free to there provided your order is over a certain amount. You can visit the website. So I'm just going to do the end of this honeysuckle stitch now in exactly the same way as I've done the previous two. So just twisting the ribbon, passing the ribbon back down through the centre of itself, allowing it to pull itself into a point, and then turning the end of the ribbon over. So this little petal, I'm starting in exactly the same way as the previous 3. So I've twisted up to 1 inch and I've couched. I'm now going to open this out in exactly the same way as I was doing before. I'm going to pull it down to a bit more of an angle. And I'm going to pass the ribbon right through the bottom of itself rather than the centre. I'm going to just pull this through, and then I'm going to use another needle to place in the ribbon just to make that curl over the way I want it to. So this is one of the ones that's starting to open up here. So I'm just going to do the top bit now, which is a straightforward ribbon stitch. So I'm finding trouble finding somewhere easy to pass it through the fabric over all these braids. So just pass the ribbon back down through the centre of itself, and there you see we've got a nice open honeysuckle flower there. I'm going to continue sewing these little petals now, so I've got about 7 or 8 of them. So exactly the same as before, twisting the ribbon, popping a needle in, couching up to about 1 inch, and finishing the petal off. So now I've got 3 marker pens, pastel pink, pink carnation and fuchsia pink. These are pro markers from Letrosat, they're permanent. They blend into each other beautifully when they're wet. They won't bleed out onto backing fabrics provided you don't touch the backing fabrics with them. So I'm using the lighter pink, that's the pastel pink, most of the way up the petal. Then using the carnation pink and the fuchsia pink on the very tips, and this gives each petal a beautifully subtle naturalistic colouring effect. I always do everything in white and then colour it afterwards, because that way you get a much better result. You'll be a lot happier with what you do, and it's a lot cheaper because you only have to keep white ribbon in stock. You only have to keep white anything in stock, come to that, and you can just dye them with your pro markers afterwards. So just colouring these petals now, it's very easy to do. They do look beautiful when you've finished. So there we go, that's our main honeysuckle flower. I'm now going to work on some little tiny stamen in the flowers. So I've got some 2mm pure silk embroidery ribbon. I've just brought it through and I'm twisting it and just making a large stab stitch through the fabric, making sure that the ribbon is good and twisted so that I get a nice fine little stamen. So I'm just going to do 3 of these in each open flower. So if you like the look of the pro markers and you want to get some, there is Cowling and Wilcox. They sell the cheapest pro markers that I know of. They're the best price available, certainly in the UK, and you can get a free postage code. If you go on to the craftyattic.com website, the postage code is there on the pro marker page for you. and you can get free postage just from watching this video, basically. So you can see that on the end of each of these little stamen I've done a French knot to form the very end. French knots are very, very simple to do. They look complicated, but they're not. So I'm just going to do the third one here, and I'll talk you through the French knots. So you bring your thread up through the fabric, wind the ribbon 3 times around the end of your needle, and then pass the needle back down through the fabric again, pulling tight around the needle as you go, and that will form a beautiful little bead for you. They actually look like little tiny buds when they're done. They're really cute French knots. They give a lovely texture to your work as well. So now I've got 2 different colours of yellow here. So I've got 2 different yellows here. It's pastel yellow and tulip yellow, and I'm using the lighter pastel yellow on most of these little stamen, and using the darker colour on the very ends. So pastel colour, pastel yellow on the stamen itself, and then on the ends the tulip yellow. So carefully lifting the other petals out of the way so I don't turn them yellow as well. So I've got some more 2mm pure silk embroidery ribbon. I've tied a knot on one end. I'm now going to do some very large kind of French knots. They're almost bullion stitches. So I'm winding the ribbon around the needle 8 times, and then I'm passing the needle back through the fabric about 5mm away from where it came up, and I'm just doing one of these bullion stitches in between each of my little petals, just to form the crown from where the petals come out. So now I'm just going to colour these. I've got holly and grass pro marker colours, and I'm just touching these little knots very gently. The silk will suck the pigment that it needs from the pen, and provided you don't touch anything else, you won't get the ink on anything else. It's all fine. So I've just touched those now with the light green, and then with the darker holly green I'm just going to touch the very tips to give that a nice deep effect. So now I'm going to do some little stems. So I've got some, I think this is 7mm white silk embroidery ribbon. I've brought it up through the fabric. That's how I'm going to lay it there. I want to make sure I put a good solid twist in it, so I'm just twisting it a little bit more. I'm going to pass it back down through the fabric at the base of this flower. Just pull it tight so that it'll pass through nice and easily without forming a knot. And then I'm just going to use a couple of pins just to very carefully peg it down the shape I want it. There. And now I'm going to just use my couching thread. I'll just couch that stitch down. So just sewing it over about every 5mm all the way up its length, just to anchor it firmly to the fabric. So I'm going to do another couple of stems here. I'm using the same twisted thread that I had before, twisted ribbon should I say. I'm going to do one little stem for a little group of buds and one stem for a little group of berries. You know, honeysuckles, when they're finished flowering, they turn into little red berries on the end. So I think it would be nice if we had a group with all 3 stages of the honeysuckle flower. So again, I've decided where I want that stem to go, and I'm just now couching it down. So I'm going to form this little honeysuckle bud in exactly the same way as I did the unopened petals on the main stem. I'm just going to make them slightly shorter this time, so they're a little bit smaller. So I'm not going to couch quite so far up the twisted ribbon bit. And obviously I'm going to make the end, when I do the ribbon stitch on the end, I'm going to make the end smaller rather than wider and fatter. So just pull it a bit tighter really, and you'll get the right effect. So there's my twisted ribbon stitch on the end. Just pull the ribbon through itself and then flip the stitch over so that it's upside down. You might have to fiddle with these a little bit sometimes, so that's fine. So I'm just going to do a few of these, so they form a nice little group. I'm just going to do probably about 5 of them together. I get quite a few emails from people who are worried that they're doing their stitches wrong, and I think there's only one way to do this wrong really, and that's if you forget to have fun doing it. Provided it looks beautiful when you've finished and you're happy with it and you had fun doing it, you're doing it right. So there's another one, slightly more open than the first one, and I'm just going to carry on. So I've got 2 pro markers here. It's the Holly pro marker back again, and the brown is Caramel. I'm just now colouring the stems, as they're a little bit woody sometimes, aren't they, honeysuckle stems? So I'm just going to do the caramel colour over these stems, and then I'm just going to do a few spots with the darker holly colour, and these will blend together so that you get a nice variegated effect. If they're not blending enough for you, you can always just go over with the lighter colour again, and you'll see that they will blend in nicely. So I'm happy with that. So we've got the 3 pinks again: pink, carnation, pastel pink and carnation pink, pink carnation. Fuchsia pink, that was the other one. So I'm just dyeing the little bud petals here in exactly the same way as I did on the larger flower, so using the lighter colour at the base of the petals, the slightly darker colour towards the end, and the really dark colour on the tips. So I've got my 2mm ribbon back now, and I'm just going to again do a few of these bullion stitches in between each petal on the bud in exactly the same way as we did on the main flower. So 8 winds around your needle, and pass the needle back through the fabric about 4 or 5mm away from where it came up. So there we go, 8 winds and back down through. You might need to use a pair of pliers just to tug your ribbon through the fabrics sometimes. I'm doing this onto a piece of crazy patchwork, so obviously there's quite a few thicknesses here. We've got the foundation fabric that's in the hoop, and then there's the actual patchwork fabric, the seam. Sometimes I'm stitching through a seam at the moment, that's why I need the pliers. And then there's the trim that I'm stitching through as well. So you can actually do silk ribbon embroidery on some pretty thick fabrics if you want to. We've got the holly and the grass pens back now. I'm just going to dye these little bullion stitches in exactly the same way as I did the other ones. If you're starting out doing silk ribbon embroidery and you want to make life easy for yourself, you could forget the crazy patchwork and just do it on some open weave linen, or even some just cotton poplin. Will make one layer of cotton poplin, make your life nice and easy. I've got some little red beads now. I'm going to use these for the berries. So I'm just on my couching thread, putting the bead on, putting then a little green seed bead, and then going back down through the top of the bead again, so that I get the very end of the bead, the very end of the berry, sorry, with a little green bit on it. So I'm just going to do that a few times with a few different beads. I've got 2 different sizes of red bead here, some small faceted ones and some larger pink ones. So now I've done my little group of berries there. I've got some 13mm white silk embroidery ribbon. 13mm is always quite difficult to pull up through your fabric because there's a lot of it. So I've just pulled it up through the fabric here, and I'm going to do some ribbon stitches, just straightforward ribbon stitches to form leaves. So I've passed the ribbon back down through the centre of itself, and I'm just allowing it to curl into a leaf point at the end. I'm going to do a few of these. The first honeysuckle leaves are always quite close to the flower, right at the top. So I'm going to try and arrange them beautifully. I'm having to use the pliers on this because it's quite wide ribbon and I've got several thicknesses of fabric to worry about. So there are loads of other flowers on my YouTube channel, on my website, if you want to have a go at doing the different flowers there. There's a video showing you how to make this crazy patchwork hexagon if you want to have a go at doing the quilt I'm making. So these are quilt as you go hexagons. I've got the holly and the grass pen back, and I'm just using grass colour towards the stem, which is the lighter green, and I'm using the holly, which is the darker green, towards the end of the leaves. So I'm just allowing the wet pigment to blend into itself along the warp and weft of the silk ribbon. The ribbon will do all the work for you. You don't have to worry about a thing. It's really easy to do. It looks absolutely stunning when you've finished. So there we go. I'm just going to do the rest of those now, and there's our honeysuckle, the little beads, the stems, the leaves and the buds all finished. So you can order ribbons you need from craftyattic.com. You can order the pens through the website as well. There are some other embroidery supplies there, so do come along, have a look at this, look at the other film tutorials and have fun. Thank you very much for watching.